This week we'll be focusing on the age factor in second language acquisition. Take a moment and think about which of these statements you agree with. There is no right or wrong answer. All of these statements have some merit to consider how adults and children learn language similarly or differently. And many of these statements have been used to influence the teaching, especially of second language. Take a pause on this video and reflect on what you think is true at this moment about the influence of age on language acquisition. This topic is actually extremely complex, most of all because there are many intersecting variables that affect language acquisition, first and second language acquisition. The human brain goes through many changes. Personality and external factors like the environment also affect language differently at different ages. There are both similarities and differences between child and adult L1 and L2 acquisition. So overall, the topic of age in acquisition of a language is a work in progress. It's something that's continually being researched, and our analysis and understanding of it is continually evolving. You'll be able to have a chance to look at some of the more current research on age and acquisition as we do our research spotlights. So as we move into talking about a major component of our chapter, the critical period hypothesis, it's important to talk about the ethics of doing this type of research on language acquisition. So in order to determine if there is a critical period, a moment in time in which after which children cannot learn a language completely for their first language, to do a scientific study on this would require something unethical, which would be depriving children of a language, right? So because we definitely don't want to do that type of unethical research, our critical period hypothesis remains just that, a hypothesis. It's based on some anecdotal evidence specifically related to feral children, children who were either sadly deeply abused or neglected and deprived of language, or children who grew up away from humans for some other reason, which probably is abuse and neglect too. So the critical period hypothesis, also sometimes called the sensitive period, is a concept in child L1 learning that seemed also relevant to L2 learning. And its overall idea is that puberty is considered the cutoff point for optimal language learning. So before puberty, people can learn a language almost perfectly, like a native speaker, but after that, it becomes much harder. So there's many reasons and factors to consider when discussing the critical period hypothesis. And some of these are provided with links for you just because this topic is so deep and complex. The brain and neurobiological considerations are extremely important. The brain goes through a lot of changes, not to mention, or kind of chief among them, lateralization. So lateralization means that the two hemispheres, the left and the right hemisphere, each develop their own specializations, and that happens around the time of puberty. So looking at the different spheres of the brain can give us some more insight into age and language acquisition. There's a website where you could look to read more about that. In terms of biology, there's also very interesting articles from nature, from other animals, about critical periods. For example, when birds can develop their songs, and if they're around other birds who are not their actual mother and father birds, or their family birds, different species, right? How can they develop their songs, and how does that affect the different development of their songs? Obviously, human and birds are different, but there is some evidence for a time limit on learning sound in nature, and humans might have a similar window that closes down at some point. Okay, there's also a lot of cognitive considerations related to the critical period hypothesis. So you may have studied the Piaget's stages of intellectual development before. in terms of how humans are able to think at different stages in their development, whether we're able to think symbolically, or only concretely or abstractly, and how would that affect language learning and second language acquisition. We can also consider the idea of implicit learning versus explicit conscious learners. So many people suggest that children are better language learners because they're not conscious of the fact that they're learning. They just sort of pick it up or acquire it. There's also the idea of equilibration, moving through stages from doubt to certainty, which occurs up to age 16. So there's a lot of movement from doubt to uncertainty and figuring things out, where adults tend to have more fixed thinking, less doubt overall. So that can also play into language learning. Many people are interested in affective considerations that affect child and adult language learning differently. So that could include empathy, self-esteem, extroversion or introversion, or inhibition. So affect can influence how someone learns a new language. Many people also mention the concepts of stress, or motivation in considering people's affective filters for learning a language. So as adults might have more stress, would it make it harder for them to learn a language? Some other considerations that are important to take into account when thinking about age and language acquisition would be the kind of unique nature of accent and pronunciation. So while many elements of a language, while second language speakers who begin learning as adults are able to acquire grammar, vocabulary, and other features of a language very well, many people say that accent or pronunciation is unique, that it's much harder to acquire it at a high or extremely high level, okay? Although there are some exceptions, of course, to those rules, which were discussed in your book. Also discussed in the book is the age of arrival or age of onset, and how old people were when they shifted their environment, okay, or also when they started learning a language. And finally, it's really important to consider the validity of tests used to measure language ability. So as you saw in the chapter, sometimes someone's language ability is assessed by non-experts who consider whether the pronunciation of that person, what's their approximation to native-like pronunciation, or grammar. So some of the tests have actually been problematic in terms of determining someone's inherent language ability. So can we say overall that children are better language learners than adults? What do you think upon the conclusion of this chapter? And can we say that children are better in the short term, in the long term, or both? And the truth is, to what extent does it really matter to us as in teaching? When we arrive to the teaching point, it's important to consider these factors of age and second language acquisition, but at the same time, it's not going to stop us from doing our best to educate someone who has that desire or need to learn. Thank you.